Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got another balance update here, and, well, for once, Yoshi actually labeled this one right. This is indeed a minor update, as, well, it's just a bunch of hero changes, and there's still quite a lot of heroes to discuss, but we've got no item balance or general changes this time around. So, as always, a link to the patch notes will be in the description down below if you want to follow along, and let's get started. Up first, we've got Apollo, who's getting a couple of buffs here to riposte, and uh-oh, some stun duration has been restored to this ability. On the tier 2 upgrade now, you get an additional 0.4 seconds of stun duration, bringing the total up to 1.2 seconds, which is quite devastating. And they also changed the melee resist around a little bit. They buffed the base melee resist reduction from 22% to 25%, but they actually took more away from the tier 2. It went from 30% down to minus 25%. So it's now just a clean 50% at the tier 2, but this is notably a little bit lower than it was before. At least if you don't have any upgrades, it is, I guess, a small buff. And then the tier 3. Well, it's just gotten even stronger. From 60% lifesteal up to 75% lifesteal, up from 7 to 13 seconds, almost doubling the duration of that lifesteal. My goodness, they really want people to upgrade this ability. That is very, very tempting. I mean, that is basically, if you think about it, Infuser and Vampiric Burst levels of healing now against the riposte target for 13 seconds. These only last for 5 seconds. That's really big. That's really big. Now, the question remains, of course, whether you actually want to upgrade to this or not, or if the other abilities are still just too gosh darn important because they provide you with all the damage that you need. I don't think anyone's going to be prioritizing Riposte Tier 3 over Flawless Advanced Tier 3, for example, but you might start to see more people pick up these upgrades now because these are getting absolutely buffed to the moon. One last important thing to note is that Itanilo-san got a bug fix this update, so it will no longer be cancelled with certain movement abilities. So, you should have more consistency on actually casting this now. Billy just got hit with another round of nerfs, and one of them looks to be particularly interesting, but also devastating to his damage output. So let's start with the two small ones. His base health regen has been reduced from 2.5 down to just 2, alright, fair enough, and Chain Gang Spirit Scaling has been reduced from 1 to 0.7. 30% less spirit scaling on this ability now, and that is of course to the damage component. But what's really interesting this update is Rising Ram. The tier 3 has been completely reworked. So instead of dealing max health as spirit damage to the enemies, you now gain max health for 16 seconds. So if I hit this dummy here, I go from 820 health to 902 health. Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. And it looks like it does just kind of heal me there. So if I go ahead and reset my hero, half health myself, and then go ahead and hit this Rising Ram, it does indeed just heal that health and increase my max health, similar to how Blasted works. So it's basically like a Blasted hit, but on steroids. So this will greatly improve Billy's self-sustain, at the cost, of course, of one of his most powerful damage tools. That 7% max health as spirit damage was absolutely titanic, especially when scaled with Tank Buster and a whole bunch of other spirit scaling. And remember, the damage of that scaled with spirit too. So he is really losing just so much damage this update on the Rising Ram, but that sustain is going to make him a lot tougher to kill, so this is a really interesting trade-off, but it does ultimately seem like probably a net nerf towards Billy in the long run, as I imagine this will be countered by anti-heal, and yeah, that damage is just, oh, it was so strong. So, Joe Chuck is getting some nerfs next. We have some door nerfs to Doorman. First of all, the range is just getting reduced by 5 meters on the doorway. That's absolutely fair and reasonable. But the more interesting change here is that, well, the walkers and the turrets in your base will no longer consider luggage cart dragged enemies as valid targets to trigger the stomp and damage on until after they are dropped off. So while they are actually being shipped on over to the walker through the doorway, the walker won't actually target them anymore. It'll only target them after the luggage cart is over, giving the enemies much more time to respawn and get out of the way of the walker stomp or the turrets or anything like that. This is a very major nerf, of course, to the kidnap playstyle for Doorman, and as someone who exclusively plays against Doorman, because I hate playing as this character, I will take that. Heck yeah. Drifter is getting some well-needed nerfs here to the Rend and Stalker's Mark. Rend's spirit scaling has been cut down from 1.7 to 1.4, losing out on a lot of damage there. Thank goodness for that. This thing is hitting like an absolute truck these days. I'm sure it'll still be able to proc Tank Buster and all that with enough investment, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. And Stalker's Mark is also getting nerfed on its uptime. The base cooldown is increased from 24 to 26 seconds, and the cooldown reduction on the tier 2 has been nerfed from 12 to 10 seconds. So now it is a 16 second on the Stalker's Mark here as opposed to a 12 second cooldown previously. Wow, so this is a really interesting change for Holliday here. It's not strictly a nerf in most circumstances, although it will technically make her just a little bit weaker in some niche situations. So her powder keg here is no longer a burst ability. It is now a damage over time ability. It has 80 impact damage and does 27 damage per second here, as you can see with the tier 3. If I take it off the tier 3, you can see the respective numbers here. So it does the same exact amount of damage as it did previously, but it's just spread between this burst component and a damage over time that lasts 3 seconds. Multiple instances of this will stack up the damage, so if you have a low cooldown on this from, say, a rapid recharge, then you can just hit multiple kegs like this, and you get 2 sources of DOT. Now, this is, in some cases, going to feel a little bit worse. Let's say you're in a really cutthroat 1v1, and you need a little bit of burst to kill the enemies. Well, this isn't going to burst them as effectively anymore, and so you might end up dying, whereas previously you would have lived because you would have killed them faster. And also, if the enemies happen to use a Dispel magic at the wrong time for you, then you're going to lose out on potentially half your damage from the powder keg. But on the flip side, something you might consider now, is that escalating exposure may be viable on Holliday, as this will proc escalating exposure and ramp up the burn, and especially if you have something like a spirit burn on top of that, that all of a sudden might be a viable way to play this character. So that is a bit of a silver lining, and that could also make this more of a buff than a nerf. It's just a really interesting change. We'll have to see how it feels as it plays out over the coming days and weeks. Ivy just getting one small nerf here. The tier 3 stone form here is getting 1/4 second taken off of the stun duration. So now it is a 1.5 second stun duration. And let me just check here. You can indeed still get a heavy melee off, as you can see there, and of course if you do have duration extender or superior duration for whatever reason, it'll still be a very long stun, but just a little bit less oppressive than it was before. The Lash is also getting a small nerf, kind of like Ivy, so the fall-off range on his gun has been reduced from 20 meters down to 18 meters at the start, and 58 meters down to 54 meters at the end. So, yeah, if you're one of those weird gun lash users for some reason, like if you use this Osis build, that'll affect you just a little bit. Otherwise, yeah, it's same old Lash. Now, McGinnis here is one of the most consistently high win rate characters in the game, and it looks like Yoshi is finally addressing this with a whole bunch of changes here. More changes than any other character in the game this update, so if you're a McGinnis main, pay attention, and if you also hate playing against McGinnis, pay attention. So, first of all, her bullet damage, base, and growth values have been reduced by 5% across the board. Just 5% less gun damage. Spirit resist per boon has also been reduced nearly in half, from plus 0.625 to plus 0.35. I actually kind of didn't realize she got that. But yes, indeed, at max boons now, she has 12% spirit resist. Previously, my gosh, I guess that would have been closer to 24%. So that is a major nerf to her sustain. Mini turrets have also received some big nerfs here. First of all, they will no longer shoot heroes on zip lines. So no more getting on the zip line, not realizing there was a turret in the vicinity, and then immediately getting stunned. That is very good. And also, mini turrets no longer have 80% decaying resist for the first 6 seconds. This is a gigantic nerf, because it means that the turrets will now be much easier to kill immediately after she deploys them. And so if you're quick about actually shooting at them, you'll be able to take them down and take hardly any damage from these turrets. It's a massive consistency nerf. To compensate, they did increase the health scaling. They now start at 100 health, previously it was 90, and their health per boon has gone from 7.8 up to 9. So I do think that is a fair compensatory buff. You will need a little bit more damage to kill them than you needed before if they didn't have resist, but previously they had 80% resist, now they don't have that, and so it'll end up still just being a lot easier to kill these things. But now let's talk about the Medicinal Spectre. So the tier 1 has been completely reworked. It is now plus 1.5 seconds of duration. Gone is the 40% spirit resist for just a single ability point. That was just a little crazy. So this will actually end up giving her more healing on lane, and if you're against a gun-heavy lane as McGinnis, this actually kind of ends up being a little bit of a buff for her. And the 40% spirit resist has indeed gone up to the tier 3, as you can see there. So the tier 3 used to increase the duration by 1.5 seconds, it no longer does that, it now has that 40% spirit resist. So if you fully invest into this, you will still be very, very tanky in the Spectre as you were before. But early game, this won't be nearly as oppressive as it was. And that's about it here for McGinnis. So yeah, the turrets just got a heck of a lot less reliable. Medicinal Spectre, slightly weaker, much less spirit resist from boons, less gun damage across the board. Yeah, McGinnis is gonna feel worse this patch. Sorry, McGinnis mains. Paige here getting a buff that could easily fly under the radar, but this might actually be pretty big. So the plot armor weapon damage scaling has increased by 50%, from 0.2 to 0.3 spirit scaling. Just out of curiosity, if I go ahead and get like a boundless spirit here, from 25% up to 52% weapon damage on plot armor here. So, you know, if you're playing Paige, and you got a Vindicta on your team, or a Wraith, or a Haze, or someone like that, this buff's gonna go so crazy this update. This might actually be really freaking strong, especially because she also gets that fire rate scaling when she upgrades the barrier here. So yeah, pretty sly little buff here for Paige. You know, if I didn't know any better, I would accuse me of bribing Yoshi, because what is this 7 change? 7's just getting one buff this update, and it's to the lightning ball. It has a bigger radius at tier 3, from 1.5 up to 1.75. And I mean, as you guys know, I mean, this is what I play on 7. I play lightning ball. I upgrade lightning ball. I get range, and it's just better now. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know why they're buffing 7. It genuinely doesn't make sense. I wouldn't be doing that, but I'll take advantage of it, I guess. Vindicta's getting one nerf this update, and after having played against her in ranked a lot recently, I think she needs a heck of a lot more, but, well, she is at least getting a little bit less damage on the stake, from 65 down to 45. A literal drop in the ocean compared to her damage output when she scales up with Assassinate stacks, but, hey, a damage nerf is a damage nerf. Now, Vyper is a character who's been doing very well at the high ranks if you look at her win rate, and so it's a little surprising to see her get a buff here, but indeed, Petrifying Bola is getting a lot stronger this update. The radius has increased from 8 meters up to 12 meters, 50% extra radius, and the duration has been increased from 2 to 2.2 seconds. So this is really good, especially when you pair it with the tier 3, because it petrifies all enemies in the area. So you just get to petrify a much bigger area now, and for much longer. Now, one could argue it's a double-edged sword because, you know, maybe you don't want to petrify everybody in the room because you won't be able to deal damage to them, but I think ultimately for most players this is a net buff for Vyper, just a net buff in most situations. That big AoE stun is absolutely devastating. And finally, Wraith here getting some well-deserved nerfs. So the card trick, Heart Heal Scaling, has been reduced from 1 to 0.75, considering considerably less healing on this. And the full auto tier 3 spirit scaling has been reduced from 0.06 to 0.045. So just a little bit less damage and a little bit less healing on this character. Absolutely reasonable. One could maybe make the argument to nerf her a little bit more, but this is good. This is fine. I'm okay with that. But anyways, let me know what you think about this update in the comments section down below. Do you agree with the changes that Valve and Yoshi have made to the game? Or is this patch kind of a stinker? Personally, I think it's pretty alright. I'll take the 7 buff, I guess. And yeah, just nice to get a couple of balance changes here, while I'm sure they have bigger things cooking up in the kitchen behind the scenes. So, as always, if you found this video to be helpful, make sure to drop a like and subscribe down below so you don't miss out on future update videos like this one from me. And I will see you all next time. Peace out.